Okay, so we have got another very, very exciting speaker, and I am so happy to have Renee on this call. Renee, do you please unmute yourself and say hi to us?
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Renee. So
How are you?
good to have you. I am so happy. I'm even happier now because you've literally made my dream come true. I've been following your work for so long, and obviously, you know, we've already done some work with Black in AI community, and I know you are passionate and pioneering, and I have seen so much of everything you've been writing about, you know, racial biases, about biases in general, and I'm just pleased that you have found 20 minutes for us today just to talk to us about what you're working on. And I'm really delighted. So everyone, this is Renee Cummings, and she is a criminologist and international criminal justice consultant who also specializes in AI, ethical AI, bias in AI, diversity and inclusion in AI, algorithmic authenticity and accountability, data integrity and equity, AI for social good and social justice in AI policy and governance. I've said it all. These are my favorite words. You literally are my, most favorite person to have in this accelerator during these talks. And obviously, we select all our speakers, but I was just so passionate about everything you do that I was just overwhelmed when you said yes. I have got the time, so it's over to you. Please do tell us about your work, and I'm just looking forward to hearing what it will all be about.
Thank you so much. Of course, it's certainly an honor and a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for having me. So yes, I am a criminologist, and it is my work in criminology that got me into AI and AI ethics. So is everyone hearing me well?
Yes, we can hear you, and this is streamed onto YouTube, so the questions will be on YouTube. Thank you, Renee.
Fantastic. Now that I know everyone is listening. So yes, so what was happening in AI a few years ago is that we were realizing in the criminal justice system that we were using these risk assessment tools built on algorithms called algorithmic decision systems. And these algorithmic decision systems were behaving badly in the sense that they were overestimating individual risk, and they were making predictions that were inaccurate. So the algorithms were what we would describe as zombie algorithms and opaque algorithms. And this became very frightening because you would imagine in the criminal justice system, you want to get a decision right because a decision could be a matter of life or freedom. And not I'm saying life in prison or freedom to be outside and able to interact and to be there with your family. So we were seeing these decisions. We were seeing some very problematic decisions, particularly as well with juveniles. And we realized that somehow these algorithms were operating in a way that was replicating old biases, discrimination, systemic racism, and many of those old patterns in society that we really did not want to see in the decision making in the criminal justice system because it's such a high stakes area or environment. So there was a big expose, I think, in 2016 by ProPublica, and they looked at the fact that Black and brown people were getting sentences that varied quite peculiarly from other races. And I think that led me into AI because I started to think, what's going wrong here? What's happening in these algorithms? Why aren't we looking at these algorithms more deeply and more intensely to see the kinds of challenges that we were faced with? And the more that I started to speak about what was happening at the intersection of AI and criminal justice, the more that I actually fell in love with AI. So I do have a deep passion and love for the potential of AI, its pervasiveness, its power, its ability to operate with speed and at scale, and the promise that AI has to do all these extraordinary things, to change the world, to impact humanity, to really imagine and reimagine the kind of world that we want. But also when we're using an algorithm, when we're using that something that is designed by another human, we've also got to appreciate that there could be great peril. There could be some danger if left unchecked. So this is why a lot of people call me a data activist, because I speak about data vigilance and data consciousness. And what I speak about is the fact that we've got to understand that we need an ethical approach to AI. And an ethical approach to AI would pretty much be the fact that we've got to be conscious of things like privacy, accountability, safety and security, transparency and explainability, fairness and non-discrimination, having a human-centered approach to design, having a professional responsibility to the ways in which we design, and ensuring as data scientists and as developers and as creative thinkers within the realm of AI technology. I'm gonna have to put my air conditioner on. I hope it's not too noisy. If it's too noisy, just let me know. We were realizing that we needed to have more of an ethical approach to this technology. And we were also realizing that the lack of diversity, the lack of inclusivity, the lack of equity within the realm of AI was really undermining AI. And really, it was undermining AI in a way that we were denying a more creative mix of talent coming into the AI space. So one of the things that I got really passionate about is really bringing a multidisciplinary approach to AI. And I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. Before I became a criminologist, I was a journalist. And then I worked a lot in the entertainment industry, working in music, working in the early days of music videos in New York City, and working with some of the talent who would produce music like R&B, hip hop, reggae music, soca and calypso music. So working in entertainment. And then I worked at FIT, which is the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, because I do have this love for fashion and that energy of fashion as it pertains to style and color and all those beautiful things when it comes to fashion textures as well. And then I was motivated and moved from a personal experience. When I was a teenager, a very close friend of mine was actually addicted to crack cocaine. And he died before the age of 21. And I was really deeply troubled by the fact that he did not get the opportunity because of the lack of really effective rehabilitation intervention. And I really found myself moving in that direction. So I did a master's degree in counseling psychology, and my focus was on substance abuse therapy and working with persons in particular who were incarcerated because of substances. And that is where I first found myself thinking about criminology. Because as a substance abuse therapist in the court system in New York City, I realized that most of my clients also had a criminal record. And that's how I really got into criminology. I came from a place of restorative justice and a place of social justice. And it's one of the reasons that I think I have been able to combine artificial intelligence and social justice in a very unique way. And that is where my passion really lies. So in my work in AI, what I do is I do the business side of AI as well. So I speak to businesses and I speak to organizations and companies and executives about implementing AI within the organization and building what I call an ethical organizational culture for AI. And what I do there is to ensure that the designers, everyone who's around the design table, has an appreciation and a really deep understanding of how things like bias and discrimination and systemic racism can impact the design of a product and can really impact not only the design, but how it's developed and how it's deployed and how it's received by a community. And when I speak about bias, I'm not only speaking about race or systemic racism, I'm speaking about gender, sexuality, disability, mobility, access. All of these things impact the way in which we design a technology and the way in which a technology is used and received by individuals in a society. But then I also do the social justice side of AI. And that is why I'm really so impassioned about ethical AI. And ethical AI really has to grab a hold, in particular right now, of the direction in which it's going. Because we can't say we're designing ethical technology and we're excluding different communities from the design process. So one of the things that I want to encourage people to think is to think in a very multidisciplinary way. You don't have to be an AI ethicist or you don't have to be a data scientist to get involved in AI. What AI needs right now would be diverse intelligences. What AI needs right now would be a multidisciplinary perspective to design. Because technology, as you will know, has an extraordinary impact. And that impact could be positive, or that impact could be negative on society. Every aspect of the life cycle when it comes to technological design impacts society, communities, the environment in a very unique way, even the psychology of the individual. Pre-social media, we didn't have many of the existing or pre-existing psychological or mental illness challenges that we are seeing right now with that technology. Pre-social media, if your friends did something or had a party or went to an event and they didn't tell you, you didn't know until you probably met them again and they recounted what they did. Now we can see in real time what they're doing because they're posting on Snapchat, on Instagram, they're tweeting, they're putting it up on Facebook. So what I'm showing you is that technology has extraordinary impact on our well-being as a society. And that well-being could be from mental health to physical health, to environmental health, to social health. So what technology needs and what AI needs now in particular would be that multidisciplinary approach. So you can want to be an educator, you can want to be a social worker, you may want to be a doctor, you may want to be an accountant, you may want to be a fashion designer, you may want to be just about anything, an entrepreneur, designing organic products. But you have this extraordinary piece of technology that you are now able to use to really scale up your business, to really do something extraordinary and something so imaginative with your business that you can really not only make a name for yourself, not only be able to support yourself financially, but you could really make a difference in the world. And I'm not being cliched because you can make a difference. But in that making of a difference with AI, it is important that you are data vigilant. And when I say data vigilant, what I mean is this. You've got to understand if you're using technology to design a system or deploy a system or to really enhance or improve any kind of product that you're using, you've got to appreciate the impact this technology can have, the negative impacts. And you've got to really ensure what you're doing pays attention to what we call due diligence. And due diligence is about fairness and understanding that people have access to understanding the technology, to understanding that this technology has been designed in an accountable and a transparent way. And then there's something called duty of care. And you've got to ensure that what you're using this technology to do is to do good. Now, nobody is saying that in doing good, you may have some challenge, you may be encountering some challenges. What I'm saying is that you want to ensure that there's what we call that duty of care. That duty of care is to ensure that what you're doing, you're taking care of the approaches, you're taking care of communities, you're being careful and cautious that you're not creating any kinds of unnecessary trauma or difficulties or harm in a particular community. The other thing that you want to think about is being data conscious. And being data conscious means that you've got to have an appreciation, historical appreciation of technology and about change and about how communities are impacted or how communities are marginalized because of technology or how some communities could become victimized because of technology or feel alienated. So now we come back to criminal justice. And what we're seeing in criminal justice is that the application of AI could be a really powerful tool when it comes to understanding crime trends or crime patterns and crime anomalies, things that don't look right. We've also seen the very positive use of AI when it comes to crime forecasting, when it comes to crime prevention, when it comes to DNA analysis, when it comes to fingerprint analysis or any kind of forensics, when it comes to forensic pathology. We're seeing this technology making extraordinary strides in those areas. But when it comes to the application within the realm of justice, we're seeing that predictive policing is very racist. We're seeing that using analytics, using data that's historically biased or historically discriminates against particular groups, and using that in things like policing, security, surveillance, can have really serious repercussions for individuals, for their rights, their civil liberties, their human rights. We're seeing that people who are saying that they could use technology like facial recognition or emotion recognition to see whether or not someone is criminal or whether or not someone has the propensity or the proclivity to perpetrate a crime. Those things are negative. Those things are encouraging certain stereotypes. Those things are alienating and victimizing, marginalizing, and have the ability to harm communities. So that's why I'm saying we've got to have an ethical approach. And this is where I'm going to just wind it down. So an ethical approach says that we know technology is not perfect. We know that humans are designing technology, so it's not going to be 100% right. But an ethical approach says that I'm conscious, I'm cautious, I'm vigilant. I understand the challenges that we face as a society, and I understand how those challenges, the biases, discrimination, can find their way into the data sets or the data point that I'm using. And I have that level of understanding and consciousness to know that I've got to detect these biases. I've got to mitigate these biases, and I've got to manage the process to ensure during the life cycle, that design, development, and deployment phase, that I'm on it, that I'm on the technology, and that I'm checking, I'm doing those checks and balances, and I'm really coming up with alternatives to ensure that everything we do, we are doing it to the best of our ability. We're doing it in a responsible way. We're ensuring that the AI that we create is trustworthy, and we are ensuring that what we do is really going to future-proof society, is really going to build that better tomorrow today. And it really means that you've got to always understand that we've got to have diversity at the table. We've got to mix it up. We've got to have those diverse intelligences. We've got to ensure that technological design is inclusive, that it does not alienate, that it does not exclude. And we've got to ensure that there is equity and there is buy-in. And how do we do that? We do that by ensuring when it comes to the education around AI, and when we are looking at that next generation of AI, and I think that's the generation that I'm speaking to right now, that you understand the responsibility that you have, that you understand the creative energy that you possess, that you understand that you can use this technology to create the world that we want, the world that we need. And you're not going to use new technology to create old divisions. And I just want to say to you, as you move forward in your career, understand that you have the potential for what is extraordinary, and use this technology to develop extraordinary opportunities for everyone in society. Thank you.
Wow, this was amazing. And truly, this was exactly what I was hoping to hear, because it's only day 2. They are diving into human-centered design. They're looking into problems. We have experts in our Discord channel, from NHS, looking into mental health, anxieties, fake news, education. There are so many incredible challenges that have been offered, and they are looking into exploring, speaking to experts, speaking to the users. So human-centered design is very much embedded into our process. And what you have said was just so important to hear right now, because it's just so important that ethics is something they do consider. We do have a few ethics mentors who would be looking into the algorithm or speaking to the teams and asking them some really tough questions. But I'm so grateful that you're here with us speaking about this. So I am inviting our young AI enthusiasts to ask questions. So I'm waiting for some questions to come. And in the meantime, I just want to ask you, what can they do to mitigate, biases? Because they're looking into data sets right now. Today, tomorrow is when they will be looking at data sets. what should they do to ensure that the data set is representative of the, the people they're designing it for? How can they ensure there are less biases? What steps should they take?
I think that you've got to ask questions, and you've got to ask yourself, who collected this data? What's the context in which this data was collected? What were they trying to use this data to do? When they collected that data, how representative were they? How much did they know about the particular community? What was the depth of the understanding about that community? Because when you look into a community, you oftentimes look into that community with a spyglass that's built with your pre-existing biases. And we all have biases. We all have stereotypes. We all have preferences, but we've got to learn to check that. And we've got to learn to look at the history of the data, look at the context in which it was collected, look at how it's been used in the past, and just ask yourself, how could I use this more effectively? What do I have to mitigate against? What am I going to take and what am I going to discard with this data? And is there a way technologically or another way that I could improve this data set to build whatever is the system that I want to build? But you've got to have that understanding. It's like being an investigator, I'm a criminologist, and one of the things that I do is interrogate. The way we interrogate someone when it comes to a crime is the same way you've got to interrogate an algorithm and a data set. Don't let it slip by. You've got to corner it. You've got to, really look into it, because that's the only way you're going to get the best out of that data set. And that's the only way you're going to be able to design something that says that I've taken an ethical approach to this design.
Brilliant. No, this is fantastic. And I have a question here, and this is about regulation. So should we be regulating technology? Wouldn't it stifle innovation? How do we ensure, we don't go overboard, but at the same time, we don't, let another Cambridge Analytica happen? So what can we do? And how do we make those people accountable? Because at the moment, we're seeing a lot of people are really getting away with murder, quite frankly. So what do we do to really mitigate this? And is there any regulation out there? Or are we moving in that direction right now? What would you say to that?
So there's a lot of regulation out there. There's European regulation, there's American regulation. But the thing that you've got to understand with technology is always light years ahead of the law. The law is playing catch up. And that's one of the ways, or one of the many reasons why big tech create all of these loopholes. The other thing that I want you to think about the law when it comes to technology, sometimes when we want to access an app, or sometimes when we want to access a technological service, we just click right through saying, I accept, and we've read absolutely nothing. And right there in that process, we may have signed away our rights to privacy when it comes to the use of our data. So we've got to be more vigilant. The other thing that you want to think about is that technology and the law, it's not a trade-off between innovation and ethics. You can have ethical innovation. When it comes to accountability, I think because AI and tech, as old as it may seem, is still very new for a lot of people, that many individuals are not there yet. So this is why public awareness, public education, public engagement, stakeholder engagement in the design of a tool or a system or a product is so very important. And this is why we say we need to have that diversity, equity, and inclusion in the AI space, because when we do that, it's not going to be perfect and it's not going to be a complete system, but it's a system that makes you question. It's a system that creates checks and balances. And this is why we say explainability. You've got to be able to explain, particularly as we've seen in the criminal justice system, why did the AI come up with a decision that Renee should get 15 years and X should get 5? And I think what the criminal justice system is showing us, and many individuals in the criminal justice are showing us, is that within the law, we have the right to face our accusers. Within tech, we have the right to interrogate. We should have the right to interrogate an algorithm. It brings in questions about intellectual property and proprietary rights and trade secrets, because an algorithm is a trade secret. But I think this is where we talk about due process and the right to justice, And this is where you've got to find the right balance. When it comes to some of the big mistakes that we have seen, or the atrocities that we've seen when it comes to AI, it is because that lack of accountability and that lack of transparency, and the fact that the population was just not there yet. And things are happening that you're not understanding. So this is why I try to educate, I try to demystify data, and I try to let people know that science and math, the foundations of AI and algorithms, are not as neutral and as objective as we would think they are. And if it's man-made and if it's man-created, it will have societal issues. So you've got to be data conscious, you've got to be vigilant, and you've got to be an activist in your own right to ensure that what you're doing is right for the greatest percentage of people in society.
Fantastic. No, this is brilliant, and I'm really grateful you have offered us already so much advice. So it's, as I said, day 2. There will be another 8 days. I have no idea what will happen by the end of the 8th day, but they are going to be thinking about ethics. They really are forced to consider what might go wrong. In fact, this is one of the judging criteria. The judges will be looking into what can go wrong and how are you going to mitigate this. Top 3 tips that you could offer to these teenagers. There are 40 of them. They're all very eager. They will be exploring lots of different tools. They will be looking into data science, AI. So what can you leave us with, the top 3 tips that they could perhaps implement, from today?
You want me to leave them? I didn't hear it. 3 tips.
That they could integrate, maybe some advice that they could integrate as they are developing their products. What would be the 3 most essential things that they could really consider as they are looking into the technologies, so that they perhaps, less likely to get it wrong, hopefully by the end of the 8th day?
Always remember that a piece of technology that you design is your legacy. And that technology lives on, and it continues to live on. And ask yourself, what is the legacy that I want to leave in this piece of technology? So think of it as a legacy. The other thing that you want to understand is future-proofing. You've got to future-proof. You've got to create that better tomorrow today. So in everything you do, think about the impact this technology will have on future societies. And think about if someone was to get that technology, or that technology was to get in the wrong hands. Always think about that. And the other thing that I would say is think about yourself. Think about the things that you like. Think about the things that make you feel good. And think about how you will feel, or how you feel when you are excluded. And whatever you feel when you're excluded, or whenever you feel when you're alienated, whatever that emotion is, ensure that when you design your technology, that technology does not allow anyone to feel that way.
Fantastic. And I know we're only literally a minute away from when you need to jump off to another call. So I am really grateful, Renee. We will end here. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm really grateful. We will share this with everyone else who was not able to join us. That was fantastic advice, and just grateful. And I'll stay in touch and let you know what happens at the end of the 8th day.
To all the beautiful teenagers who are starting their AI journey. And I'm going to look forward to all the fantastic things they're going to produce. And just be honest to yourself and stay creative, and don't be too hard on yourself. Just love yourself, okay? Take care.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Renee.
Sure.
All right. That was amazing. I just love what Renee does.